8 battleships, 3 frigates. Every officer on both sides could do the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said 20 minutes. Commander Beck Ilunga was drinking cold coffee on the bridge of the frigate Adamant when the impossible contact resolved out of the shoals. He had escort duty, the unglamorous kind. 14 transports crawling toward the Meridian Nebula, carrying the evacuated population of the Corvin mining stations, 11,000 civilians in ships built for ore. His escort force was the Adamant and her 2 sisters, the Resolute Star and the Harrier. Frigates, convoy dogs. 1,200 tons of speed and good intentions apiece. The contact was the enemy's 2nd Battle Division, 8 capital ships that were supposed to be a system away, sliding out of the sensor shadow of the shoals on a course that put them across the convoy's escape line in 40 minutes. A wall of armor between 11,000 civilians and the nebula that meant survival. The mathematics were not complicated. The transports could not outrun battleships. The frigates could not fight battleships. The nebula was too far. Surrender was the textbook option, and the textbook assumed the enemy took prisoners, and 2 years of this war had shown what the enemy did to evacuation convoys instead. Ilunga finished his coffee. His officers watched him. Later, all of them agreed. The silence lasted under 10 seconds. "Signal the transports," he said. "Scatter for the nebula. Best speed, no lights. Signal. Resolute Star and Harrier." He paused, and the pause is famous now, and what came after it is carved into the memorial at Corvin. "Form on me. We are going to attack." His sensor officer, 19 years old, said what everyone was thinking. "Sir, it's a battleship line." "I know what it is," Ilunga said. "In 20 minutes it will be a battleship line that is looking at us instead of the transports. That is the entire plan. It is not a good plan, but nobody has a better one, and the clock is running." 3 frigates turned together and lit their drives and charged. The charge of the Corvin escorts lasted 41 minutes, and naval colleges of 2 species have spent decades mapping every one of them, because by every model the ships should have died in the first 10. They survived on smallness, fury, and physics. Battleship guns are built to kill battleships, great slow-traversing batteries that throw fire across thousands of kilometers, and Ilunga refused to fight at thousands of kilometers. The frigates went in at full burn behind their own sensor chaff, jinking on randomized thruster programs that hammered their crews grey and closed the range with a speed the battle line's fire solutions kept underestimating. The frigates fired everything they carried, and none of it could kill a battleship, and all of it could sting. Torpedoes forced the great ships to maneuver. Railgun fire stripped sensor masts and scarred gun ports. The Harrier put a full salvo into the lead battleship's bridge tower at 800 kilometers, blinding its fire direction for 6 minutes, an act of insolence. The enemy gunnery logs recorded with something close to disbelief. And the frigates got close. That was the heart of the madness. Inside 300 kilometers, battleship main batteries cannot depress fast enough to track a frigate crossing their bows, and the escort dogs wove through the line itself, between the giants, so close that the enemy ships fouled each other's firing arcs, so close that secondary batteries filled space with fire that hit mostly nothing, and once, catastrophically for the enemy formation, hit a neighboring battleship's forward turret. The cost ran with the clock. The Resolute Star lost her forward, third to a main battery hit in minute 19, and fought on with what remained. The Adamant burned along her port side, half her crew fighting fire instead of the enemy. In minute 33, the Harrier, run to knife range by 2 battleships turning to trap her, made her choice, transmitted 3 words, and rammed her bow through the enemy flagship's drive ring. Her 3 words are the motto of the escort service now, on both worlds, though it took years for the enemy to admit they taught it too. Still. Here. Or air. Adamant. She was telling her sisters she remained in the fight, right up to the instant she spent herself. The signal cut off mid-transmission. The fleet finishes it for her at memorials every year. Still here. In minute 41, with 2 burning frigates still weaving through his formation and his flagship trailing the wrecked drive ring, the enemy division commander gave the order that ended his career and saved his soul, though he would spend 30 years learning the second part. All ships come about. Break off action. Withdraw east at battle speed. 8 battleships turned away from 2 crippled frigates and a fleeing convoy and left. Aboard the Adamant, nobody cheered, nobody believed it. Ilunga watched the enemy line recede on his ruined sensor plot and ordered his exhausted crews to hold stations for the trap that had to be coming, and held them at stations for 6 hours until the transports were deep in the nebula and provably unpursued, before he allowed himself to say, in the log, that it appeared the enemy had genuinely gone. 11,000 civilians reached safe harbor. The Resolute Star made port under tow, was rebuilt, and serves as a museum now. The Adamant came home under her own power, with 62 of her crew, and every one of their names is at Corvin, the living and the dead together, which was Ilunga's specification. The question crossed the war and outlived it. Why did the line turn? The stakes of the answer were larger than one battle, and both fleets knew it. Human doctrine writers needed to know if desperate escort charges worked or if the Corvin convoy had merely been lucky. Enemy doctrine writers needed to explain how 8 capital ships had been repelled by 1,200-ton convoy dogs. Careers, budgets, and the design philosophies of 2 navies leaned on the answer. The enemy court-martial supplied the official version within a year, and it satisfied nobody. The division commander, stripped of command, testified with a stubbornness that baffled his judges. He had taken the human charge, he said, as flatly impossible. No commander spends 3 ships to buy minutes. Therefore the charge was not what it appeared. Therefore the human main fleet was behind the shoals, and the frigates were beaters driving his division onto its guns, and he had declined the trap. There was no human main fleet within a system, the prosecutors observed. There was no trap. I know that now, the commander said. I invite the court to place 8 battleships in front of 3 ships behaving impossibly and see what the court believes. They broke him anyway. His name was Admiral Vos Tarran, and history had 30 more years of plans for him. The war ended 4 years later, and the 2 stories of the Corvin charge settled into their respective navies like unexploded shells. On the human side, the charge became legend with a doctrine problem attached. The escort service took Still Here for its motto, Corvin Day for its festival, and Ilunga, who stayed in uniform and rose slowly on merit, and an absolute refusal to trade on the story for its conscience. But the tacticians fretted, and their fretting was correct. The charge had worked. Nobody could reproduce why. War games that recreated it killed the frigates 9 times in 10. Something had happened in the enemy commander's mind that the models could not capture, and doctrine built on another mind's mystery is superstition in a dress uniform. On the enemy side, the story was shame with a mystery attached. Vos Tarran, dismissed, unbroken, spent his disgrace writing a treatise, privately circulated, that his officer corps confiscated, condemned, and passed hand to hand in secret, every copy dog-eared at the same chapter, the one titled The Arithmetic of the Impossible. Its argument, decades ahead of its time, was this: every commander carries a model of the enemy and reads their actions through it. My model said, no force spends itself utterly for strangers. 3 frigates behaved outside my model. I concluded my model of the situation was broken, and in war, when your model breaks, you withdraw and rebuild it, because fighting inside a broken model is how fleets die. My error was not the retreat. My error was the model. I had no category for what those 3 ships were doing, and I'm writing this so the officers who come after me will have one. The category he proposed, the treatise's famous coinage, translates as sacred expenditure. The spending of everything, by the small for the defenseless, without calculation of return. Against forces engaged in sacred expenditure, he concluded, standard deterrence arithmetic inverts. They cannot be discouraged by losses, because loss is already their plan. You have two choices: kill them all, and inherit what their fleet becomes when it learns you did, or give them what they are buying. I gave them the convoy. 30 years on, I remain professionally in disgrace and arithmetically correct. The two men met at last at the 30th anniversary, and the meeting was engineered by their juniors with the tenderness of a fleet action. The armistice was old and warm by then. Corvin Day had become a shared observance in the border systems, human escort crews and enemy veterans marking it together, because the war's children had discovered they preferred each other's company to their parents' silences. For the 30th, the Corvin Memorial Committee, Mixed Species and Irreverent, issued two invitations. It described internally as the whole point of everything. Admiral Beck Ilunga, retired, 81, and Voss, Taran, 90, living in scholarly disgrace on a pension his own fleet had thrice tried and failed to revoke, his confiscated treatise now, in the way of confiscated treatises, the foundational text of his Navy's modern command school, taught by professors who pretended not to know the author was alive. They met at the memorial wall, under the names, with half the border systems watching, and the exchange was not what the cameras expected. Voss Taran spoke first, formally, in rehearsed fleet standard. "Commander, I have waited 30 years to ask. The charge. What was behind the shoals?" "Nothing," Ilunga said. 14 ore ships and 11,000 terrified people. You were beaten by 3 frigates, Admiral. I am sorry to confirm it." The old enemy absorbed that, nodded slowly, and then said the thing that made Ilunga laugh, the great cracked laugh the recordings preserve. "Incorrect, Voss," Taran said. "I have reviewed the engagement for 30 years, and I was not beaten by 3 frigates. I was beaten by what the frigates were carrying. You loaded those ships with something my fire control had no counter for, and you knew it, Commander. You knew it when you turned. My battleships were armored against everything except the sight of somebody spending everything they had for someone else. That is the weapon. I have spent my disgrace naming it, so my fleet would recognize it next time." He looked up at the wall of names. "And my fleet does recognize it now," he said quietly. "That is why, this time, we are on the same side of the memorial." What the two old men did next occupied their last decade and quietly rewired 2 military cultures. They wrote the book together. The Corvin engagement, both bridges, the only major military history composed jointly by opposing commanders, alternating chapters, each man annotating the other's decisions with a candor that made both admiralties wince and both officer corps buy it in bulk. Ilunga's chapters described the charge from inside, minute by minute, and dismantled his own legend with a care that readers found almost fatherly. "I was not brave," the famous passage runs. "I was cornered, with witnesses." Bravery is what we named it afterward, because the truth that 11,000 people needed 20 minutes and 3 ships were the only coin was too plain for medals. Do not train your officers to be brave. Train them to see the coin and the clock clearly. The turn takes 10 seconds. The seeing takes a career. Voss Taran's chapters did the harder thing. They mapped from inside the anatomy of a commander's certainty as it broke, and his final chapter, The Category Problem, is now assigned at every staff college of both species, usually in the same week, usually with the same essay question, the one the old admiral set himself and answered with his life. What does your model of the enemy have no category for, and what will you do in the minute you meet it? He supplied his own answer, the book's last lines, and they are quoted wherever the 2 fleets work together now, on rescue stations and joint patrols, in the mixed crews the old men lived to see. "I met a thing without a category, and I called it a trap, because traps were what my model contained. 30 years of study have produced the true name. It was a promise, being kept, at ruinous cost, in public. My fleet had promises too. We had simply stopped believing anyone kept them past the price. 3 small ships corrected us, and the correction cost me my career and gained my species a conscience with a hull number. Guard your promises, officers of both fleets. They are the heaviest ordnance you carry, and the only kind, I can testify, that battleships turn away from. The frigates themselves had afterlives, because ships that make history are never quite allowed to stop. The Resolute Star, rebuilt after the war, served 40 years and was preserved at Corvin as the memorial's centerpiece. A reconstructed forward third, deliberately painted a shade different from her original stern, so that visitors ask and are told. The Harrier exists as a debris field and a law. Her wreck, embedded in the drive ring of the enemy flagship she killed, was declared a joint war grave by both fleets, the first of the shared graves and the law that protects it. The Harrier Convention on the graves of the small extends now to every escort, picket, and convoy dod lost in either fleet's service. Her bell was never recovered. In its place, at Corvin, hangs a bell cast from armor plate donated by the enemy flagship's survivors, who petitioned for the honor and whose inscription took the committee a year to approve because it kept making the review board cry. It reads, "For the small ship that stayed, from the big ship that turned, still hair, both of us." And the adamant serves still. That was Ilunga's doing, his one exercise of legendary privilege. When the fleet moved to retire her, he intervened with a proposal the escort service ratified by acclamation. The Adamant became the service's commissioning ship. Every new escort crew of the human fleet takes its oath on her quarterdeck under the patched portside scars, and every new commander receives, at the end of the ceremony, a mug of deliberately cold coffee and drinks it and learns why. Because the whole calculus of the escort service, the tradition insists, fits in that mug. You will be small, you will be outmatched, the clock will be running and the coffee will be cold, and the only question that will matter is the one the service printed under the adamant spell. What are you carrying, and who is behind you? Answer clearly, the tradition says, and the turn takes 10 seconds. Bek Ilunga died at 91 on Corvin Day, with timing his old adversary called, in the eulogy, tactically impeccable to the end. Voss Taran, 99, made the journey to Corvin against every medical order in 2 fleets, stood at the memorial wall in the dress uniform his navy had, at last and officially, restored to him, and spoke for 11 minutes without notes to the largest mixed species gathering the border systems had ever assembled. Most of the eulogy is private now, in the way of things too true for constant quotation, but the ending traveled, and it is the ending both fleets keep. "He beat me in 41 minutes, the old admiral said. "I have had 60 years to return the favor, and I report failure. Every model I have built of Bek Ilunga breaks in the same place his charge broke my line. At the moment of decision, where my arithmetic says a man weighs his survival, the model meets something that does not weigh. It spends. I searched his fleet's books for the source of it and found a nursery rhyme, of all things, a thing their escort crews teach their children. I will say it now, badly, in their language, because it is the truest doctrine I ever captured. And the enemy of humanity's old wars, at the wall of humanity's honored dead, recited the escort service's children's rhyme in accented fleet standard, while 2 species stood together and did not manage composure. The big ships carry the guns, my love. The great ships carry the war. The small ships carry everything else. That is what small ships are for." He died the following winter. His fleet, which had broken him for turning 8 battleships away from 3 frigates, buried him with full honors, and his stone bears the rank they restored and the epitaph he chose, which is one word in the human language, unexplained and requiring on his world no explanation at all. Turn, D. The doctrine of the charge settled in the end into both fleets' bones, and it settled as 2 lessons that the staff colleges deliberately teach in the same session because each is dangerous without the other. The first lesson is Ilunga's, and it is taught with the clock. 20 minutes was the entire strategic universe of the Corvin engagement. Not the war, not the fleet balance, not doctrine. 20 minutes, 11,000 people, 3 ships, 1 decision. Officers are trained to find that clock in every crisis, the real clock, the human one, and the exercise that closes the lesson gives them 40 seconds of falling data and asks one question. Who is behind you, and what does the time actually buy? The second lesson is Voss, Terrans, and it is taught with the mirror. Your model of the enemy is a member of your crew, the instructors say, and it stands its watch in your head, and like any crew member it can be wrong, and unlike any crew member it never reports its own errors. The Corvin charge is run in simulation from the enemy bridge, and the students, knowing everything, feeling the impossibility of 3 frigates coming on through fire that should kill them, are graded on a single decision, not whether they turn. Whether they notice the moment their model broke and say so out loud in front of witnesses in time for the saying to matter. Most fail. The passing few describe the same instant. The moment you stop asking what the enemy is doing, one graduate wrote in the essay, both academies now anthologize, and start asking what they love enough to be doing it. That is the whole hinge. Fleets see threats. Only crews see promises. Be a crew. Above the simulation hall door, at both academies, human and old enemy alike, the same words close the lesson, the joint inscription the 2 authors approved together in the last year of their correspondence. 8 battleships met 3 promises at Corvin. Count again. It was 11,003. The battleships were outnumbered. They were the only ones present who ever did the arithmetic correctly, and it took them 30 years to show their work. Corvin Day is the border system's great festival now, and it belongs to the children, which everyone agrees is the correct final custody. The day has its solemn hour at the wall, with the bell of donated armor and the reading of the names. The Harriers 63 always last, always followed by the whole crowd, 2 species, finishing the transmission together. Still here. But the rest of the day is the regatta, and the regatta is the point. Every child of the border systems who wants one gets a boat, tiny solar sail dinghies built in school workshops through the winter, and the course is a scale model of the engagement, boys for battleships, and the children run the Escorts charge, weaving their cockleshells through the line while their families roar from the viewing decks. There are no winners. There is only finishing, and every child who completes the weave receives the same prize, presented by a veteran of either fleet, a mug, child-sized, of cold sweet coffee, and the words of the service. What are you carrying, and who is behind you? The answers the children give are collected every year in the festival book, and they are the treasure of the whole observance, 11,000 small answers and counting. My sister is behind me. I am carrying our cat. I am carrying my grandmother's name. I am carrying everyone. This boat is very big. The festival book's first page carries the 2 patrons' portraits, the commander and the admiral, facing each other as they faced each other once across 41 minutes of fire, and between the portraits the dedication the memorial committee chose, which is the whole story, and the reason it is told. For the small ships and the big ones that learn. The line turned. It is still turning, one mind at a time, one child at a time, everywhere the promise is kept in public. Form on me, the old signal says. The convoy is everyone. The nebula is the future. The clock is always running. And the coffee, by sacred tradition, is always, always cold. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.